I want to turn to some important new reporting this hour on a turf war over whose job it is to find some very important missing text messages. The Homeland Security Inspector General instructing the Secret Service to stop its internal investigation into why January 6th related text messages were deleted. Let's get the latest from CNN's Whitney Wild. Whitney, what is this about and why is it important?
Well, John, the Secret Service received a notice Wednesday telling the Secret Service to stop investigating the matter because it could interfere with the Inspector General's own investigation into what happened to the agency's text messages. This Wednesday letter coming from the IG telling Secret Service, in effect, stand down for now. The letter adds to this growing tension between the Secret Service and the DHS Inspector General over these potentially missing text messages, which are also, John, being sought by the House Select Committee as part of its investigation into former President Donald Trump's actions and movements on January 6, 2021. Here's a quote from this letter. To ensure the integrity of our investigation, the USSS must not engage in any further investigative activities regarding the collection and preservation of the evidence referenced above. This includes immediately refraining from interviewing potential witnesses, collecting devices, or taking any other action that would interfere with an ongoing criminal investigation. John, we know that the IG has the authority to eventually refer things for criminal investigation. The problem here is that the Secret Service has already begun what they call a very rigorous review into what happened to these potentially missing text messages and why. That's because they were subpoenaed by the House Select Committee. They've told the House Select Committee they're conducting forensic examinations. They're doing interviews to try to abide by that directive. This is certainly making things so much more complicated for the Secret Service as it tries to satisfy all of these oversight bodies who, John, now appear to be starkly at odds with one another.
At odds with one another, to say the least. Whitney Wild, appreciate that important reporting. Joining our conversation now for some important context, our CNN legal analyst, Carrie Cordero, and the former Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe. Andy, let me start with you. You worked at a law enforcement agency that, yes, sometimes has to update the phones.
That's right.
Sensitive investigations. There have to be careful protocols in place. What in the world went wrong here?
Really great question, John. I have been through this process from every level in my time in the FBI, as an agent and then as a senior leader overseeing some exchanges, technological exchanges. I've never, ever seen a process that involved every individual agent or user of a phone, putting the responsibility on them individually to preserve their own data. It's inexplicable to me.
Inexplicable, and we'll see how it gets sorted out. And more importantly, I guess we'll see if we actually get any of the messages, which could shed some light on January 5th, January 6th, what the agents were having. As part of this, we have the January 6th investigation. Now you have this DHS Inspector General. You have the Justice Department investigation into January 6th. The Attorney General of the United States said yesterday twice, no person is above the law in this country. He said nothing stops us. And then in the context of, can you investigate Donald Trump, right? No person above the law in this country. I can't say it more clearly than that. Did Merrick Garland just have to say that publicly, or is there a message in that?
I think that's about what we should expect for the Attorney General, and I think really we shouldn't expect much more, because if we want the Justice Department to be abiding by the traditional norms of not commenting on ongoing investigations, not casting aspersions on people who have not been charged with any crimes, and allowing them to conduct the investigation that they have, then really we don't want to hear that much more from the Attorney General. So I think that is about as bland a statement as we could hear from the Attorney General, but frankly, I don't think he should be saying much more about it.
Well, the January 6th committee has been trying to lead the Attorney General to the water, if you will, through its testimony and its public hearings. It's put a lot of damning testimony. The legal experts who look at this say they see 4 potential crimes for the former President of the United States: obstruction of an official proceeding, certification of the election there, conspiracy to defraud the United States, seditious conspiracy, witness tampering. Tonight, a primetime hearing about that 187 minutes of what Donald Trump did, and more importantly, what he refused to do during that. Is that proving dereliction of duty, or do you think it's important tonight with these White House insiders to help prove, is that a crime? Dereliction of duty is dereliction of decency, but what about when it comes to crimes?
I think we need to step back from the crime cliff, as it were, right? And remember, what is the committee trying to do? The committee is trying to present a compelling and complete, thorough narrative to the American people to understand all of the bad things that Donald Trump did. One of those bad things is completely obliterating and ignoring his oath to protect and defend the Constitution, to ensure that the laws are faithfully executed. And he did that by, as we'll see tonight, twittering away, watching television, and doing nothing to stop the attack on the nation's capital.
Yeah, I think tonight is less about the committee laying out potential evidence for criminal culpability than it is about potentially having political arguments in the future to prevent him from receiving a nomination or assuming office, public office ever again. The dereliction of duty was the subject of the second impeachment. It is about his inaction and the things that he didn't do to protect the country, to protect the safety of lawmakers, and to protect the law enforcement personnel who were at the Capitol site that day. But I don't think it's the same conversation as potential criminal exposure.
And the committee promises some new information tonight. They have delivered on those promises in the past. We will see if we get it tonight as well.